Meccha Chameleon sold its first 15 million copies in just 26 days. It's made by 2 people and it took 2 months to make. The design it runs on is 15 years old, and you know it, it's Prop Hunt, but it still peaked at 340,000 players at once. The thing is that they changed one thing about Prop Hunt. Instead of turning into an object that's already in the room, you now paint yourself onto a wall. That mode has been sitting inside other people's games for free this whole time, and anybody could have taken it, but only they did. I want you to test your own game against theirs right now. Take the thing your player does the most often and write down every option they can have. If you just wrote that list and it's shorter than you expect, your players will reach the end of it faster than it took you to write down. And looking at Meccha gave me 5 things I would change about my own project. The first one you just ran, whether the player can finish a list. And the fourth one is where I think the answer to that 15-year gap is. Old Prop Hunt hands you some objects that sit in a room and tell you to hide. Anything from a crate to a barrel or a chair can be in that list. Most of them are terrible cover though. A crate against a wall of crate works, but if you take the same crate and put it in an empty corridor, you will get shot really fast. So the 40 choices you think you just had of objects are in reality about 8. That 8 is a number a person can finish really fast, especially in a game. So if you give a player 6 evenings on one map, they will have memorized every single portion of it. And on some maps, it's even fewer than 8 options. But that's just from my own gameplay sessions, so take that number as a feel. The direction itself is the part I would defend though. Somebody chose to hand the player a menu, to take the decision into the player's hands. There's a point in every session with a game that has a list like Prop Hunt where you can feel like it stops. Hiding and seeking both stop being a decision because you already know where the other party is going to look. So the usual answer is more objects or more maps to reset the player's memory, and then ship another map as soon as the first one is memorized. And that is why Prop Hunt has lived on for 15 years as a mode inside Garry's Mod and Fortnite and dozens of others. But almost never it gets purchased as a game people buy on their own. The important thing is what Meccha made out of it. Meccha has a smaller toolkit than Prop Hunt. We all know that. You have fewer things to be, less to memorize, and it never reaches that finishing point. You pick your color, you stand somewhere, and then you draw. There is no right answer on how to learn this game. But the gap between them is you and your vision. That 15-year gap sits just at the point where Prop Hunt gave the player a list to memorize, and Meccha gives you a judgment to get better at it. Even after 100 sessions, you still pick a shade that you want to pick, because maybe a wall is a bit different or the light is a bit different. For example, if you have 2 players that stand in the same corridor, they can get completely different results. But now the obvious objection. Fixing content works fine. Like Hitman, it gives you the same maps, the same targets, and people still put hundreds of hours into a single level. And I think it's really important to make this objection. But it looks a bit different in Hitman. What you get better at is timing and reading where the guards look. The list surfaces the problem. The judgment is the part that you need to make, because just like your mechanic, it needs to be creative. And I'm fairly sure that is the whole split of that game, because I can't think of a fixed content game people stick for years, where the skill just lies in the list itself. But if you can think of a good example, please point it out. Counter-Strike is an extreme version of this. It has the same amount of maps for 25 years and people still don't finish it. Because what you get better at is aiming, and what the other 5 people are probably about to do. But then if you look at games like Among Us, which everybody played for a few months and then mostly stopped, they had their list of tasks and the judgment as well, so why didn't it fail? Among Us still relies its other mechanics on this list. If all players finish their lists, the game is going to end. So the question you need to make is whether there is something underneath that list that is worth getting good at for the players. So take the answer you wrote down at the start. If the list is short and there is nothing underneath it, more content doesn't help you out. The more content might even be a map, and that's a really expensive fix, because you're paying with the time it takes you to make that map. But the cheap version of that fix is to find one axis in what you already have and make it continuous. And that is the same thing Meccha did. They threw out the object list and instead used the player as the main content tool. And they made that whole game out of that small swap. So look at the thing your player does the most often and ask whether there's a slightly better version of doing it. If you can only find a correct answer to the thing the player does, you found the problem of your game. If stories and tips like this help you, subscribe, and with that, I hope I'll see you in the next one.